Hello, my name is Graham Martin, 33 years old, currently living in Austin, Texas. I am the founder of a technology startup. My company specializes in developing software to optimize energy for smart buildings. This is a venture I've poured my sweat, tears, and heart into building. If you met me today, you'd likely see a confident man leading a thriving company, living a life many dream of. But if you asked about my past, I'd tell you a story that's far from easy. A story that begins in the warm days of childhood, then suddenly plunges into darkness, where I learned that family isn't always the safest place. I was born an orphan. I have no memories of my biological parents, only that they abandoned me at an orphanage on the outskirts of Dallas. When I was 3, a middle-class couple, Robert and Ellen Harper, adopted me. They lived in a charming little house in Fort Worth with a white picket fence and a garden full of daisies. The first time I stepped into that house, I was too young to understand the meaning of family, but I felt warmth. Ellen, my adoptive mother, had a gentle smile like spring sunlight. She'd hold me, sing lullabies, and tell stories about rabbits in the forest. Robert, my adoptive father, was a tall, stern man, but always made time to play basketball with me after work at the bank. I called them Dad and Mom, and in the tender heart of a child, I believed they loved me like their own. My early years were like a pastel painting. I remember Sunday mornings when Mom sat at the kitchen table baking buttery cookies that filled the air with their aroma, while Dad taught me how to tie my shoes. I loved running around the backyard where Dad had built a wooden swing with his own hands. "Graham, you'll soar like an eagle," he'd laugh, pushing me on the swing while Mom waved from the porch. In those moments, I felt like I had everything a child could need: love, care, and a sense of belonging. I thought I was the happiest kid in the world. But then, everything changed. When I was 6, my mother gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, James and Lily. The day they were born, I stood outside the hospital room clutching a yellow balloon Dad had bought me. I was excited to be a big brother, eager to play with them, teach them how to kick a soccer ball or draw sloppy cats. But when Mom brought James and Lily home, her eyes no longer looked at me the same way. The warm smile once reserved for me was now directed only at the 2 babies in their cribs. Dad was the same. He was busy caring for the twins, and our basketball games faded away. I began to feel like a shadow in the home I once called my haven. At first, I thought it was just their busyness. They had 2 new children, so naturally they needed to spend more time with them. I tried to help, mopping the floor, folding clothes, or even singing lullabies to the twins when Mom was tired. But every time I tried to get close, I was met with cold looks or words sharp as knives. Once, when I tried to teach James how to hold a spoon, Mom snatched it from my hand. "Graham, leave your brother alone. You don't need to do these things." Her voice was icy, as if I were a stranger. I stood there, hands trembling, not understanding what I'd done wrong. In the years that followed, the unfairness became glaring. James and Lily got new clothes, new toys, while I wore hand-me-downs with frayed shoulders. When I asked Dad to take me to the movies with friends, he snapped, "You need to be sensible, Graham. We don't have money to waste on frivolous things." But the next week, I saw him take James and Lily to an amusement park, laughing as if I didn't exist. I began to wonder, was I truly part of this family? The breaking point came one evening when I was 9. James, then 3, mischievously broke Mom's favorite vase. I tried to stop him, but Mom walked in, saw the shards on the floor, and turned to me. "Graham, what are you doing to your brother?" she screamed, her face flushed with anger. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. "You're just adopted, Graham. Don't think you have the right to discipline them." Those words pierced my heart like a dagger. I stood frozen, tears welling up, but I clenched my jaw, ran to my room, and locked the door. That night I hugged my pillow, crying silently, feeling profound loneliness for the first time. I was no longer their son. I was just adopted. From then on, I became withdrawn. I spoke less, smiled less, and avoided family dinners. I found solace in old books at the school library, where I could escape to other worlds where no one called me adopted. But despite the pain deep down, I was still grateful to my adoptive parents. They'd given me a roof, food, and clothes. I told myself that one day I'd succeed, repay them, and maybe, just maybe, they'd look at me like a son again. The rest of my childhood was a struggle to hold onto a shred of self-respect. I excelled in school, always at the top of my class, but never received praise from my parents. Meanwhile, James and Lily only had to scribble a drawing to be showered with hugs and have their artwork hung on the wall. Once I won first place in a school science competition and brought home a trophy to show them. Mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Graham, now go do your homework." But when Lily won a game at the park, Mom hugged her, beaming, "My girl is so talented." I stood there holding the trophy, feeling invisible. I began to question if I'd done something wrong. Was I not good enough? Was it because I wasn't their biological child that their love for me had limits? Or was there another reason? I didn't know. I let the pain and loneliness gnaw at my fragile soul. When I turned 18, I came to a painful realization. It wasn't that I was wrong, but that they had chosen not to love me. That truth hurt, but it also ignited a fire within me. I decided that even if they didn't see me as their son, I would live well and succeed, not to prove anything to them, but to prove it to myself. The day I packed my suitcase and left the house in Fort Worth, I didn't cry. I just told myself, "Graham, this is your chance. Don't look back." And I walked away carrying the scars of my childhood, but also a spark of hope that one day I would find a place where I truly belonged. I was accepted into the University of Texas at Austin with a partial scholarship, enough to cover tuition but not living expenses. My adoptive parents didn't give me a single dime. On the day I left, Dad just nodded and said, "Good luck," while Mom was busy cooking for James and Lily. I stood at the gate, looking at them one last time, hoping for a hug or a word of encouragement, but there was nothing. It felt like I had never existed in that house. I turned away, dragging my worn-out suitcase, and boarded a bus to Austin, where I would start from scratch. Austin in 2010 was a vibrant city full of opportunities, but also unforgiving to those with nothing. I rented a tiny room in an old building on the east side of town, where the walls were cracked and the air reeked of mildew. My bed was an old mattress on the floor, and my desk was a wooden crate I found on the street. I couldn't afford new books, so I borrowed from the library or got hand-me-downs from upperclassmen. But I didn't complain. I knew I had no right to. If I wanted to change my fate, I had to work twice, 3 times harder than others. To make ends meet, I took any job I could find. During the day, I attended classes. At night and on weekends, I worked as a server at a cafe near campus. Shifts stretched past midnight, my feet aching and the smell of coffee clinging to my hair. Some days, difficult customers yelled at me for bringing a latte instead of a cappuccino. I'd bow my head, apologize, and keep serving, because every tip was a meal for tomorrow. On top of that, I delivered pizzas on weekends. Pedaling through Texas's 40-degree heat, sweat soaking my shirt, I dropped off pizzas at well-kept houses where kids laughed in the yard. Seeing them, I couldn't help but think of James and Lily, of the days I dreamed of being loved like that. But I quickly pushed those thoughts away. The past was something I couldn't change, but the future was in my hands. College life wasn't easy. I studied software engineering, a field that demanded focus and creativity, but I was often exhausted from overwork. Some nights I sat in front of an old borrowed computer trying to finish coding assignments while my eyes burned from lack of sleep. I remember once during a group project I passed out at the keyboard, only waking up when a friend shook me. "Graham, you okay? You look like you're about to die," he asked, worried. I just smiled and said, "I'm fine, just a bit tired." But the truth was, I wasn't fine. I was fighting every day to avoid being crushed by debt, hunger, and loneliness. Student loan debt was my biggest burden. Despite the scholarship, I had to borrow more to cover rent and food. Each month, I spent as little as possible, often eating instant noodles or peanut butter sandwiches. Once I looked in my wallet and saw just $3 with the electric bill due soon. I sat in my dark rented room wondering if I was on the wrong path. But then I remembered my childhood, the sharp words, "You're just adopted." No, I couldn't give up. If I fell, I'd prove they were right, that I was worthless. I wiped my tears, stood up, and kept working. Despite the hardships, I never asked my adoptive parents for help. I had their phone number but never called. Part of me knew they wouldn't care. The other part wanted to stand on my own. I told myself that even if the world turned its back on me, I'd live well. Not to make them regret, but to avoid regretting myself. But sometimes in the long nights lying on that old mattress, I couldn't stop thinking about them. I wondered how James and Lily were if my parents ever mentioned me. Once I opened an old photo of the family taken when I was 5, standing between Mom and Dad, smiling brightly. Looking at it felt like a knife in my chest, but I didn't cry. I folded the photo, put it in a drawer, and told myself, "Graham, you don't need them anymore." Slowly, I found light in the darkness. At school, I made a few good friends who didn't know my past but treated me as an equal. One, Carlos, a cheerful Mexican guy, often shared food when he saw me eating just bread. "You're skinny as a stick, Graham. Eat this taco," he'd say, shoving a hot taco into my hand, refusing to take no for an answer. Moments like that, however small, made me feel less alone. I also found passion in software engineering. The dry lines of code gave me a sense of control. In the world of programming, no one cared if I was adopted or orphaned. If my code worked, I had value. I started joining group projects and coding competitions, gradually catching the attention of professors. Once, Carlos and I worked on a project about optimizing energy for smart buildings, a novel idea at the time. Our project won second place in a statewide competition, and for the first time I felt I could achieve something great. But life wasn't all bright. In my junior year, I got a call from an old friend in Fort Worth. "Graham, I just saw James and Lily at the mall with your parents. They looked happy. You should call them, it's been a while." Those words hit me like a bucket of cold water. I smiled, thanked my friend, but after hanging up I sat frozen, feeling like the world had collapsed. They were still living well, still happy, as if I'd never existed. I wondered if they ever thought of me even once. But then I shook my head, stood up, and kept coding. I couldn't let the past drag me down. Never. Graduation was a major milestone, but it also brought harsh reality. I graduated with honors, but the job market was tough due to an economic downturn. I applied to hundreds of places, from small firms to big corporations, but got only polite rejections. My student debt loomed larger, forcing me to move to an even cheaper apartment where neighbors' arguments pierced the thin walls every night. I kept working as a server and delivery driver, but the money barely covered debt, let alone a future. Once delivering pizza in pouring rain, I slipped and dropped the box. My boss docked my pay and the customer yelled in my face. I stood in the rain, soaked, staring at the ruined pizza on the sidewalk. I wondered if all this effort was worth it. But then I remembered the fire that had burned in me since leaving home. I picked myself up, returned to my rented room, and kept trying. Opportunity came one fateful afternoon when I read an article about the booming green tech industry in Austin. Startups in renewable energy and AI for environmental applications were attracting heavy investment. I recalled the energy optimization project Carlos and I had done in school, and an idea sparked. I decided to take the plunge, knowing the path was full of risks. With the little savings I had and Carlos's support, I began building a small startup, working day and night to develop software that helps smart buildings save energy. Carlos and I worked in my cramped rented room where our desk was a wooden plank propped up on an old beer crate. My college-era laptop, barely functional, often froze while running complex algorithms. Carlos brought an old desktop computer, but it wasn't much better. We shared instant noodle packets and cheap coffee, working ourselves to exhaustion. Some nights I fell asleep at the keyboard, only waking when morning light streamed through the cracked window. Our idea was to develop software using artificial intelligence to optimize energy for smart buildings. But turning that idea into reality required money. Carlos and I decided to enter a startup competition in Austin where founders pitched to investors. The first prize was $50,000, enough to buy better equipment and rent a small office. We spent 2 months preparing, working 18-hour days to perfect our prototype and pitch. I coded until my fingers went numb, while Carlos handled the interface design and market research. The night before the competition, I looked in the mirror and saw a gaunt guy with dark circles under his eyes, but they still burned with determination. "You've got this, Graham," I told myself. "You have to." On the competition day, I stood in a packed auditorium facing dozens of investors and rival teams. My hands shook as I held the mic, but I took a deep breath and began. I explained our idea, how it could save millions for commercial buildings and cut tons of emissions yearly. I shared my journey, an orphaned kid who grew up facing hardship but never gave up. I didn't know if my personal story resonated, but when I finished, the room erupted in applause. Carlos and I locked eyes, hearts pounding. We won second place with $25,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make me feel I was on the right path. With that money, we rented a corner in a shared workspace in downtown Austin. Our office was just a wooden table, a few old chairs, and a whiteboard covered in scribbled notes. But to me, it was everything. I finally felt I had a place to belong, a goal to strive for. We founded our company, naming it Green Sync Solutions. The name was Carlos's idea, inspired by syncing technology with the environment. I wasn't good with names, so I just laughed and agreed. In 2018, a real opportunity came. We were invited to a green tech conference in San Francisco, a major event drawing startups and big investors. Carlos and I could barely afford plane tickets, but we gritted our teeth and spent the money, knowing this could be our last shot. At the conference, we pitched to a group of investors from a venture capital firm called Eco Ventures. They were impressed by how our software used AI to predict and adjust energy in real time. After the pitch, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, Susan Miller, the fund's director, invited us to dinner to discuss further. That dinner was the first time I felt truly heard. Susan wasn't just interested in the product. She asked about my story. I told her about my journey, not to win sympathy, but because I wanted her to know I wasn't in this just for money. I wanted to create something meaningful, something that could make the world better. Susan nodded, her eyes full of empathy. At the end of the dinner, she said, "Graham, I believe in you. Not just because of the product, but because I see you never give up." A week later, EcoVentures agreed to invest $1 million in Green Sync Solutions for a 20% stake. That money changed everything. We moved into a real office, hired 3 engineers and a marketing specialist. I began learning how to run a company, from managing finances to building a team. In 2020, Green Sync Solutions launched its first product. We signed a contract with a hotel chain in Austin, cutting their energy costs by 30% in just 3 months. Word spread and more contracts followed. Office buildings, shopping centers, even a university in California wanted our software. Revenue soared, and 2 years after the investment, the company was valued at $10 million. I, a guy who once delivered pizza in the rain, was now the CEO of a respected green tech startup. Forbes even mentioned me in an article about notable entrepreneurs under 30. Reading it, I gave a wry smile. They had no idea what I'd been through to get here. Success brought a life I never dared dream of. I moved out of the moldy rented room into a small but bright apartment in downtown Austin. I bought a reliable used car, no longer biking in the Texas heat. I sent money to Carlos so he could buy a house for his mom in Mexico. A thank you for standing by me in the tough days. But even with money, I never forgot where I came from. I still ate instant noodles when busy, wore old t-shirts to work, and kept that adoptive family photo in my drawer. Not because I missed them, but to remind myself how far I'd come. Though my life has transformed, I still carry an emptiness inside. I haven't contacted my adoptive parents, Robert and Ellen Harper, since leaving Fort Worth 11 years ago. In quiet moments, I sometimes wonder how they're doing. Despite the heartbreak their treatment caused, I remain grateful to them. They may not have loved me as their own, but I can't deny they took me in, giving me a home when I was an orphan child. I told myself that one day I would repay them, not to beg for affection, but to prove I've lived well, that I haven't let the past define me. The idea of a gesture of gratitude began to take shape. I wanted to do something grand, something that would make them see me differently. Then I thought of a beachfront villa, a perfect gift for Dad's 65th birthday, a milestone worth celebrating. In 2023, I sold a portion of my company shares during a second funding round, securing a substantial sum. With that money, I quietly began searching for the right villa. I finally found it, a stunning villa in Galveston, a few hours' drive from Austin. It sat right by the ocean with large glass windows overlooking the sea, a lush green garden and a spacious porch where the sound of waves could be heard. The villa cost $4 million, a significant amount, but I knew it was worth it. I pictured Dad sitting on the porch, sipping coffee, gazing at the ocean. I imagined Mom planting flowers in the garden as she used to in Fort Worth. And maybe, just maybe, they'd invite me to stay for dinner, looking at me as a true son. This gift, I hoped, would bridge the years of distance. I worked with a lawyer to prepare the paperwork. The gift deed officially transferring the property to Robert Harper was signed and notarized. I kept it a secret, not telling anyone, not even Carlos. I wanted it to be a surprise, a moment that could change everything. I counted down the days to Dad's birthday, January 4th. I knew I wouldn't be invited to the party, but I decided to show up, bringing the deed and a heartfelt wish. I didn't expect hugs or apologies. I only hoped they'd see I'd become someone they could be proud of. In the days leading up to it, I couldn't stop thinking about the past. Some nights I pulled the old family photo from the drawer, staring at the 5-year-old boy beaming between his parents. I wondered if they remembered those days when they held me, when they sang me to sleep. I didn't know the answer, but I chose to believe that deep down, they still held some affection for me. This gift, I thought, would awaken that. Dad's 65th birthday arrived. I drove from Austin, my heart pounding like a kid awaiting Christmas presents. The gift deed rested in a white envelope, carefully placed on the passenger seat. I wore a simple suit, feeling the need to look polished for the first time in years. On the drive, I rehearsed my greeting in my head. "Happy birthday, Dad. I have a special gift." I imagined Dad's surprise, Mom's smile, and maybe, just maybe, they'd see me as a true son, no longer the adopted kid forgotten. The 3-hour drive from Austin to Fort Worth gave me too much time to think. I recalled my childhood in that house. Sunday mornings with the scent of Mom's butter cookies, Dad pushing me on the swing, laughing, "Graham, you'll soar like an eagle." But when James and Lily were born, everything crumbled. I became a shadow, sidelined in my own family. Mom's words when I was 8, "You're just adopted," still echoed in my head, sharp as a knife. Yet I remained grateful. They had taken in an orphan child, and I wanted to repay them with this gift, hoping it would erase the years of distance. I arrived at the old house in Fort Worth in the late afternoon. The white picket fence still stood. Mom's daisy garden was meticulously tended. Music and laughter spilled from the backyard, where the party was in full swing. I took a deep breath, clutching the envelope, and walked through the gate. My heart raced, tinged with fear. I wasn't invited. No one knew I was coming. But I told myself, "You've come this far, Graham. Don't stop now." The backyard was packed. Over 50 guests, from friends and relatives to my parents' colleagues, gathered around white-clothed tables. A small band played cheerful tunes, and the aroma of grilled meat filled the air. I stood at the edge, trying to blend in, but the moment I stepped forward, I felt eyes on me. James and Lily, now 27, spotted me almost instantly near the food table. James, tall with blonde hair, wearing an expensive shirt, smirked when he saw me. Lily, her long hair tied high in a bright red dress, giggled behind her hand, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Well, look who's here," James called loudly, his voice dripping with sarcasm, drawing attention from those nearby. "Graham, long time no see." "Still remember the way home?" Lily chimed in, her voice shrill. "He's wearing a suit. Don't tell me you're here to beg for a job at Dad's bank." They burst into laughter, as if I were a living joke. My face burned, but I forced myself to stand tall, gripping the envelope. "I'm here to wish Dad a happy birthday," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And I have a special gift for him." James raised an eyebrow, stepping closer, his wine glass sloshing. "A special gift, really? Let's see, a cheap tie or a self-drawn picture?" He sneered, eyeing me up and down. Lily, standing behind, added, "Hold on, Graham. Dad's got a special gift for you today, too. Bet you'll cry when you find out." They exchanged glances, giggling as if they held a secret I wasn't privy to. "What gift?" I asked, my voice laced with unease and a bad feeling. James shrugged, his smile smug. "Just wait. Dad'll announce it soon. Trust me, you'll want to see it before doing anything stupid." Their words made me pause. A gift from Dad? After 11 years of silence, could he be trying to make amends? I didn't dare hope, but a part of me, the boy who once craved their love, wanted to believe. "I'll wait," I said, my voice low but firm. James and Lily laughed loudly as if I'd said something hilarious. "Good call, Graham, don't go anywhere," Lily said, then pulled James back to their friends, leaving me alone in the sea of people. I scanned the crowd, searching for my parents. I spotted them near the main table, Dad in a gray suit, Mom in an elegant floral dress. As I approached, they looked up and I saw shock in their eyes. Dad froze, his wine glass halting midair. "Graham," he uttered, his voice stunned as if seeing a ghost from the past. Mom, Ellen, raised a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with a flicker of panic. What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling as if my presence was unwelcome. I smiled, though my heart tightened. "I'm here to wish Dad a happy birthday," I said, holding up the envelope. "And I have a special gift." Dad glanced at the envelope, then at me, his eyes a mix of surprise and discomfort. Mom turned away, avoiding my gaze, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Thank you, Graham. Later, okay?" Dad said, his voice flat. Then he resumed chatting with the man beside him. I stood there, feeling like an outsider, but I didn't leave. I wanted to give the gift, to show them who I'd become. And I wanted to know what special gift James and Lily had mentioned. The party went on, but I was sidelined. No one offered me a seat or asked how I was. I stood near the fence, watching people eat and laugh as if I were an invisible ghost. James and Lily occasionally glanced at me, whispering and giggling. I tried to ignore them, but each smirk felt like a small stab. I told myself to be patient, that the moment I gave the gift would change everything. I imagined Dad opening the envelope, reading the gift deed, and realizing how hard I'd worked to honor them. But deep down, a voice warned, "Graham, you're hoping for too much." Then the pivotal moment came. Dad stepped onto a small platform in the yard, tapping his glass to draw attention. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on him. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his warm voice carrying through the air. "Today isn't just my 65th birthday, it's also a chance to share an important decision." He pulled a document from his pocket, holding it up. "This is my will. I want everyone to know that my assets, this house, my bank accounts, everything will be divided equally between James and Lily, my beloved children." But he didn't stop there. His words turned sharp, aimed at me. "By the way, Graham, my adopted son is here today after over a decade of absence. He says he has a birthday gift for me. But I think he's here to curry favor. Too bad he's too late. My will is already set." Then looking at me, he added, "Sorry, Graham, since you're adopted, I forgot to include your name in the will." The yard erupted in laughter and applause. James and Lily hugged, beaming with triumph. I stood frozen, the ground seeming to collapse beneath me. Was this the special gift they meant? A will that erased me from the family, announced publicly before dozens? I looked at James, who turned to me with a malicious grin. "Told you, Graham, Dad had a gift for you," Lily piped up, her voice shrill. "I said he'd cry. Look at his face." They laughed loudly, as if my pain were a hilarious joke. Some guests glanced at me, their eyes a mix of curiosity and pity, but no one spoke up. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd say it was a prank to liven the mood. But no. He stepped off the platform and resumed the party as if I didn't exist. Mom stood there, silent, hands clasped, her face expressionless. My heart shattered. All the years of hard work, sleepless nights, and hopes for a family, gone in this moment. I was that 8-year-old boy again, standing in the kitchen, hearing Mom snap, "You're just adopted." Those words, after 25 years, were echoed by my adoptive father once more. Tears welled up, but I refused to cry. I couldn't let James and Lily see me break. I couldn't let my parents think they'd won. Clutching the envelope, my fingers trembling, I stepped forward, standing in the middle of the yard, facing Dad. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on me. "I came here to repay you, not to beg," I said, my voice shaking but clear, ringing through the stillness. I held up the gift deed for all to see. "This is the deed to a beachfront villa in Galveston worth $4 million. I bought it, intending to gift it to you both to thank you for raising me." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dad froze, his eyes widening, his hand trembling slightly. Mom covered her mouth, her face paling as if realizing something terrible. James and Lily stood stunned, their smiles vanishing. I continued, my voice now steadier. "I've worked my whole life not to prove anything to anyone but to prove to myself. I thought this gift would bridge the gap, make you see me as a son, but now I see it's not necessary." I locked eyes with Dad, then slowly tore the gift deed into pieces. The scraps fell to the ground like fragments of my broken heart. The crowd held its breath. James and Lily gaped, speechless. Dad took a step forward, his mouth moving, but no words came out. I turned and walked out of the yard, not looking back. The music resumed, but the party's atmosphere had shifted. I heard whispers behind me. "That's Graham, the adopted son. How could they treat him like that?" But I didn't care. I walked through the gate, got in my car, and drove back to Austin, leaving that house and my last hopes for a family behind. On the drive, I didn't cry. I felt a strange relief, as if I'd shed a burden that had weighed on my shoulders for decades. In the days following the party, I tried to return to my routine. GreenSync Solutions, my green tech company, was thriving. We'd just signed a major contract with a chain of shopping centers in California, and my team, now over 60 strong, worked tirelessly to improve our energy optimization software. I attended meetings, joked with employees, and gave media interviews with the poise of a successful CEO. But every night back in my apartment, I faced the quiet. The family photo was gone. I'd thrown it out after the party, but memories of them still haunted me. I questioned if I'd done the right thing by tearing up the gift deed and walking away. Was there another way to end this story without a fresh scar? I realized I needed to heal. Not to forgive my adoptive parents, Robert and Ellen, or James and Lily, but to forgive myself, the young Graham who believed he had to try harder to be loved. I sought out a therapist, a middle-aged woman named Clara. At our first session, I sat in an armchair, hands clasped tightly, unsure where to begin. "Just say whatever comes to mind," Clara said, smiling. And so I did. I spoke of my abandoned childhood, my years of scraping by, and the birthday party that shattered my hopes. I let out emotions bottled up for years like a river bursting through a dam. Some sessions I cried, others I was angry, punching the pillow on the chair. But with each session I felt a little lighter. Clara helped me see that childhood wounds don't vanish just because I'd achieved success or wealth. "You've built a life to be proud of, Graham," she said during one session. "But you need to let yourself feel the pain instead of burying it." I started journaling. something I'd never done before. Each night I sat at my desk writing down thoughts, memories, and dreams of a life unburdened by the past. I wrote about Dad pushing me on the swing, Mom snapping that I was just adopted, and the moment I tore up the gift deed in front of everyone. Writing helped me see clearly, not to blame, but to understand I couldn't change them, only how I faced myself. A year passed since that birthday party. I didn't contact my adoptive parents or hear from James and Lily. They'd become part of my past, like a chapter I'd closed. But life has a way of surprising you. On a chilly March day, I was invited to speak at a sustainable energy conference in Houston as the keynote speaker. GreenSync Solutions was now a leader in green tech, and my speech was expected to inspire young startups. On stage, before over 500 people, I shared my journey, from an orphaned child to the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I didn't mention my adoptive parents, but spoke of the wounds that shaped me and how I turned them into drive. When I finished, the audience gave a standing ovation. I smiled, feeling I'd come a long way. After the speech, I mingled in the reception area, shaking hands with investors and chatting with students. Suddenly, an elderly woman with silver hair and a high bun wearing a green sweater approached. Her eyes were gentle but tinged with emotion. "Graham," she said, her voice warm. I racked my brain to place her. Then it hit me. She was Aunt Margaret, Mom's older sister, whom I'd met only a few times as a child. "Aunt Margaret?" I blurted, surprised. She nodded, smiling, but her eyes were red. "I heard your speech," she said. "I'm so proud of you, Graham, but I need to tell you something about Robert's birthday night after you left." We sat in a quiet corner of the venue. Margaret took my hand as if to lend me strength. She said that after I tore up the gift deed and left the party, the mood in the yard grew heavy. "Everyone was stunned, Graham," she said. "No one expected you'd achieved so much, a $4 million villa meant as a gift for Robert and Ellen. But what shocked them more was how you left, not crying, not begging, just head held high." She said some guests began whispering, criticizing my adoptive parents for their unfair treatment. A longtime friend of Dad's, George, told him bluntly, "Robert, you've lost an incredible son." James and Lily, Margaret said, initially acted unbothered. They laughed, saying I was just showing off. But when some relatives left early, unwilling to witness the pretense, the siblings fell quiet. "Lily looked guilty," Margaret said. She sat alone in a corner, saying nothing. James tried to act confident but drank too much, like he was trying to forget something. Dad, Robert, didn't speak for the rest of the party. He sat at the main table, staring at the torn pieces of the gift deed on the ground, his eyes vacant. Margaret said that as she left, she saw him pick up each piece and slip them into his pocket. Hearing Margaret's account, a wave of emotion surged through me. I didn't know what to feel: pain, anger, or just emptiness. "Do you think they regret it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Margaret sighed, squeezing my hand. "I believe they do, Graham. But they're too proud to admit it. Ellen never mentions you to me, but I know she reads every article about you. Robert, he's aged a lot since that night. I think he knows he was wrong but doesn't know how to fix it." I sat silently, gazing out the venue's window, sunlight streaming through large panes. I wasn't angry at my adoptive parents, not exactly. I was just sad. Sad that we could have had a different story if they'd chosen to love me as their own. But I was also grateful for Margaret. "Thank you, Aunt Margaret," I said, smiling. "I'm okay, really." She hugged me, and for the first time in years, I felt a touch of warmth from someone in my adoptive family. After our meeting, I returned to Austin, continuing my journey. I didn't try to contact my adoptive parents or James and Lily. I didn't need their regret or apologies. I'd found freedom, not by running from the past, but by facing and releasing it. In the time that followed, alongside therapy, I found new meaning in helping others. I began engaging in charity work, focusing on supporting orphans and struggling families. I founded a nonprofit called Bright Path, inspired by my own journey. A path to light despite starting in darkness. The foundation offers scholarships for orphans, funds skill-building classes, and builds community centers in underserved areas. On my first visit to a center in East Austin, I met a 12-year-old boy named Miguel, skinny with shy but bright eyes, who lit up talking about his dream of becoming an engineer. I sat with him listening as he shared about his mother, a single janitor, and how he learned coding on an old library computer. I saw myself in Miguel, a child yearning to rise above his circumstances. I awarded him a scholarship and promised to follow his journey. When Miguel hugged me, whispering, "Thank you, sir," I felt a joy no money could buy. Charity work didn't just help others, it healed me. Each time I met an orphaned child, each time I saw hope in their eyes, I was reminded I wasn't alone. I'd found my family not in Fort Worth, but in the people I helped, in my Green Sink team, in friends like Carlos who'd been there through my darkest days. I began to slow down, savoring small moments, a morning jog by the river, a hot coffee in my office, a video call with Carlos and his mom in Mexico. I learned to love myself not through success or recognition, but by accepting I'd done my best. And for me, that was enough. I no longer needed my adoptive parents' attention or validation. That's my life story, a journey from being abandoned in an orphanage through years of hurt in my adoptive home, to the struggle for survival, and finally to the freedom I found within myself. I hope my story leaves some resonance, perhaps a spark of motivation to help you rise confidently in your own life. And I wish you the courage to face your past, the strength to move through pain, and the faith to believe that light always waits at the end of the road, if only you keep moving forward.